From the prodigy who steamrolled everyone in their path with ease, the rookie that trained their way from practice squad to Hall of Fame, or the master that has quietly concealed their true power, the strongest character trope is one that never gets old. All story long, we've built up these characters to be the best of the best of the best. And as viewers, we have this primitive love for their extreme competency. You're telling me this guy can take out an entire army alone? Yeah, he's my favorite character now, thanks. But what happens when, across the other side of their morals, goals, or ideologies, these characters finally encounter an opponent just as strong? What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Well, we get our popcorn out. On my channel, I made up this tool I call the Fight Spectrum to categorize every fight scene ever. When a stronger party beats a weaker party, it's a fly swatting. When a weaker party beats a stronger party, it's a David vs. Goliath. When the matchup is even, it's a toss-up. I could have stopped there because that theoretically covers every possible matchup, but I wanted to differentiate one last category. Essentially a glorified toss-up, an even matchup between a universe's strongest characters is called a World Cup. I chose to call these matchups World Cups for a handful of reasons. Firstly, as much as I wanted to call this category the Super Bowl, I opted for World Cup because they're the world's most watched broadcasts, and I don't think it's close. The entire world stops what they're doing to watch these matchups. Secondly, these matchups are rare. World Cups only come once every 4 years and take a month-long tournament to determine the matchup. World Cup fight scenes are even more rare. Most stories will only have a single World Cup matchup, if any. These two reasons make these matchups that much more special, and that's why I decided to make it a unique category. The stakes at hand, the implications, the mastery of battle, these fights embody everything we love about competition. But they also stand for more. I have a list of requirements for every category of fight scenes that separates the best from the rest. Sometimes I want characterization. Use the fight scene to support the narrative. Sometimes I want to see strategy. Intelligent tactics with calculated win conditions. In the case of World Cup fights, I want to see both. To explain why I have these requirements, I'm going to start with a fight that I think lacks both of these requirements, and then gradually find examples that apply more and more of my rules until we reach what I consider to be the single greatest fight scene in the history of modern storytelling. When we have the two strongest characters matched up, neither can afford to lose, so I want them to throw everything they've got at each other. To visualize how I want this to play out, I'll stack these little bars here, each representing one of my so-called requirements. Whoever's tower gets stacked higher will win their fight. Trust me, this is going to make sense soon. The simplest and frankly the lamest of these fights will only be a clash of their raw power. We're going to start off with an incredibly hot take. Let's examine the final fight of what many people regard to be one of the best action movies ever, Kill Bill Volume 1, The Bride vs. Oren Ishii. I love this movie and there were fantastic elements of this fight, but I think it just ultimately fell short. The Bride has absolutely demolished everyone in her path throughout the entire movie. Against no-name thugs, she wiped out the entire room. Against the world's most elite assassins, she was still able to consistently come out on top. This character embodies the competence that we love to see as an audience and is no doubt the strongest of the strong. Her opponent, however, is on par with her skill. Oren Ishii climbed her way to the top of the Yakuza since she was a child. She was one of the strongest members of the deadly assassin Viper Squad. She ruthlessly led the Crazy 88. Characters like Gogo Yubari gave the Bride a run for her money, and she was Oren's underling. This matchup is undeniably a World Cup. The build-up to their fight is undoubtedly awesome. The quiet, snow-filled scenery, Oren's calm demeanor as she takes her shoes off, and the Bride's bloodstained outfit from clearing out the entire building. All of this makes for such a chilling moment, which I think just goes to show how powerful a World Cup fight scene is. But didn't I say this fight is bad? Right. See, I could sum this fight up in a single sentence and wouldn't really carve out any significant details. The two exchange slices, and then the Bride cuts Oren's scalp off. That's really it. In my opinion, this fight failed because it lacked both a major narrative purpose and a clever win condition. All it had was raw strength and chance. Regarding strategy, in previous videos I mentioned my made up 5 S's of strategy. They are synergy, surroundings, sneak attack, sacrifice, and spot of weakness. Any use of these 5 in pursuit of a clear win condition is enough to get my approval, but I don't think we see any on display in this fight. The closest would be spot of weakness, but I don't even think that is a valid example. There's nothing uniquely weak about Oren's scalp compared to really anywhere else on her body, and there was no real pursuit the Bride had to make in order to attack it. Was it a spectacle? Yes, but it was honestly just kind of random too. I will admit that this fight may display strategy in terms of both choreography or swordsmanship. The problem, however, is that it would go over 99% of viewers' heads, myself included. If we, the audience, don't understand the win condition as the fight is occurring, then it may as well not have one. As for the other requirement, I've previously used the following formula to test whether or not a fight achieves narrative characterization. Character wins the fight because they are more blank. Typically, this formula will point out a clear narrative difference between the parties, such as mature versus immature, as seen in my last video. With the case of the bride versus O-Ren, I'm not sure I see anything that fits. What trait does the bride exhibit in this fight that O-Ren clearly lacks? When that blank is just strong, I think it makes for weak narrative characterization. Remember, both of these parties are maximally competent, so neither should lose just from getting outpowered. That's my stance on Kill Bill. It only used 2 blocks and left a lot of untapped potential. While it did look pretty, I quickly got bored of the simple sword swinging and was let down by the finishing blow. Still, it was a super fun movie. Next up, I have an example of a World Cup fight that exhibits one of my requirements but leaves another to be desired. This fits my criteria for a toss-up fight. Just have either strategy or characterization and I'm happy. However, with World Cup fights, I just don't think it's enough. Let's check out one of my favorite movies of the year that was honestly way better than it needed to be, Transformers 1. First off, thank you to all the comments who recommended this movie. I feel like this is one of the most underrated movies to come out in a while. Anyway, the World Cup fight we're going to be analyzing is Orion Pax vs D16, better known as Optimus Prime vs Megatron, best friends turned greatest enemies. On paper, this is a quintessential World Cup fight. First we have Megatron, who was just boosted with the addition of Megatron Primus' core after slaughtering Sentinel Prime and leaving Orion to die. And we have Optimus Prime, who was just supercharged with the Matrix of Leadership, bringing him to an extreme level of power. These two characters are now officially the strongest in their world. Furthermore, they stand on opposite ends of the moral question, what does it take to be a leader? With the fate of the world on the line, naturally, the former best friends must fight over their ideals. So yeah, the buildup is honestly flawless. The stage is set for a perfect World Cup fight. But how does it pan out? Well, for most of it, I was a little disappointed. At the start, they simply just exchange punches and kicks, then gradually integrate their weapons, but it's all a bit brainless to me. Just chaotic combat. Their respective win conditions seem to just be beat the other guy up. Megatron gets the lead and is really laying the work on Optimus until Optimus's core activates his axe weapon. The tides completely shift here. Optimus even handles a couple Decepticons who intervene. In the last act of the fight, Megatron just charges at him while blasting his guns, and Optimus easily blocks them with his axe. I don't know about you, but I thought this part was especially weak. Like, this is just not a valid attempt at winning. Finally, Optimus Prime slices Megatron's cannon, essentially incapacitating him and ending the fight. In conclusion, this fight really had no clear strategy, especially not from Megatron. You could argue Optimus Prime used strategy in going for Megatron's weak spot, but that only mattered because Optimus wanted to keep Megatron alive. I will note though, that is actually super relevant to the narrative characterization. This fight excelled at that requirement. So like I said, the tides turned when Optimus Prime activated his axe. While this could be interpreted as a random luck intervention, I would disagree and say that it was justified through the narrative. The Matrix of Leadership was mentioned to be this super powerful artifact only given to the bot deemed worthy. Of course, with Prime and Megatron beefing about leadership, I think it's completely fair that the Matrix of Leadership has a significant role in the outcome of this fight. Looking at the narrative characterization formula from earlier, we can say that Optimus Prime won the fight because he's more fit to lead. This was the central theme of the movie and the central theme of their fight. I love when a World Cup fight serves as a microcosm for the story's greater purpose, and this fight does a fantastic job at that. All movie long, we see Optimus Prime leading by leaving nobody behind, by dreaming for a better world, and by lifting people up. We also see Megatron do the opposite, worrying about revenge rather than equity, wanting to eliminate all threats, and pushing people down. Another way you could phrase the formula is that Optimus won because he's more optimistic, whereas Megatron is pessimistic. This is evident in Optimus's choice to spare Megatron at the end of the fight. A true leader never gives up on anyone. To recap, this fight had a fantastic build-up, a mediocre execution, but a really strong conclusion that tied the story together nicely. It used 3 blocks, but I would have liked to see 4 and 5. Hey guys, I just wanted to briefly jump in and ask you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I just finished up my last semester of undergrad and want to try to make this channel my full-time job someday, and if you want to help out, then subscribing is the best way to go about that. Thank you, and let's jump back in. Next up, we have an iconic World Cup fight scene that uses 4 out of the 5 blocks, if not 5. Another highly requested scene, we have Hunter x Hunter's Netero vs Meruem. The chairman of the Hunter organization, the strongest human in the world, and once the strongest Nen user in the world, versus the Prodigy, the King, and probably the strongest character in the entire story. Right off those intros, we can block in their strength. The hype around this showdown was massive. Meruem has completely outclassed every single character that has come in his path. Finally, he encounters Isaac Netero, who has the precious information of Meruem's name, and he wants to fight. The two are set to battle in an epic clash between the strongest of the strong. One thing to note, Netero is in fact out of his prime, but it's a little evened out because Meruem is not trying to kill him, just get him to submit. You know this fight's gonna gonna have masterful strategy when characters start using terms like checkmate. As we go through the fight, I will be filling in their strategy blocks, and then we'll worry about the characterization after. To start, Netero activates his Nen ability, 100 type Guanyin Bodhisattva, and slams Meruem into the ground. This is the first part of Netero's strategy. Using a sneak attack, it reveals new surroundings that are more advantageous for Netero. Both of them are now moving at impossible speeds. Netero is hitting Meruem with a barrage of attacks using his 100 arms. Meruem, however, can take them with ease, and finally starts to generate a strategy of his own. Recognizing Netero's limited set of moves, Meruem's strategy is to exploit his weak spot. He plans on continually withstanding Netero's attacks until he finally learns his patterns. After taking thousands of hits, Meruem lands a strike and takes off Netero's leg. This process continues until Meruem takes off Netero's arm as well. Comparing their towers, Meruem's strategy is clearly superior to Netero's. Unless Netero adapts his strategy, this fight is over. Adapt he does, though. He reveals another sneak attack, being his Zero Hand. This grabs Meruem and sacrifices the entirety of Netero's aura into a devastating blast. Netero is now withered away, but was it enough to defeat the king? No. He gave the strongest character a run for his money, but it was just not enough to beat him. Meruem wins. But wait. Netero has one last strategy up his sleeve. With nothing else to lose, he activates another sneak attack sacrifice by killing himself, triggering a rose bomb that annihilates the entire tomb. Meruem was able to walk away from this fight, but ultimately the poison from the bomb takes his life as well. Wow. We have a lot to unpack. Who even won that? What truly were they both fighting for? Let's try to dissect some of the key moments to piece together a narrative. Firstly, Meruem accepts the challenge because he wants to know his own name. That's an interesting motive. Netero's motive, on the other hand, is not exactly clear. Does he want to save humanity, or does he just love fighting strong opponents? Early in the fight, we get some backstory into Netero. He's always defeated every challenger with ease. When he recognized Meruem's strength, he shows his appreciation with this heart gesture. Meruem gets his own moment of characterization soon after. As he's creating his strategy and cracking Netero's patterns, he's filled with a passionate rush and love for battle, much like Netero. He prays the old man doesn't die on him before he completes the challenge. With these two moments, we can see a parallel between them. They both have a feverish love for battle. The next key moment of characterization comes much later in the fight, right after Meruem withstood Netero's Zero Hand. He commends Netero, suggesting that he's strong for a human. Meruem claims to have survived because he is the manifestation of the collective strength of the Chimera Ants. He also claims that Netero lost because he's a mere reflection of humanity's individualism. So is that the point of the fight? A battle between collectivism and individualism? Well, right after that line, Netero responds. He's disgusted that a mere ant would talk to a human like this, and then informs him that humanity's malice has no limit, before finally killing them both. Okay, so both parties insist that their respective clans, ants and humans that is, are better than one another. Furthermore, in the act of killing them both, Netero saves humanity. To me, that doesn't really sound like an individualistic mindset. Meanwhile, Meruem's desire to learn his own name was not so collectivist, but instead an individualistic desire. Once again, these characters have intertwined motives. So, who does that block of characterization go to? What exactly is this fight about? The point I'm trying to make is that ultimately, this fight tells us these characters are not really different after all. There is no winner because they share the exact same point of view. They love battle, they think they're the strongest, they think their race is superior. That's all it boils down to. A consensus understanding is that Meruem's arc is supposed to run opposite to Gon's. The monster becomes human and the human becomes monster. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I think that transcends the scope of this fight. The narrative within Meruem vs Netero is that they are the same. So while this fight absolutely reflects a key narrative, neither of them get the advantage in the characterization block. I love this fight, and I'm not trying to take anything away from it. I guess what I learned from this fight is that I just really like a clear winner and a clear loser. Can you imagine watching the actual World Cup and it just ending in a tie? It's against our competitive nature. It's finally time for the best fight scene I have ever seen. The strongest sorcerer of today versus the strongest sorcerer of history. The World Cup fight of all World Cup fights. Gojo vs Sukuna. In my eyes, the fight has 4 phases. To initiate the entire showdown, Gojo, in synergy with his team's incantations, sends a 20% boosted hollow purple straight at Sukuna, who heals himself as if it never happened. They exchange some dialogue and start throwing hands. This is what I would consider to be phase 1. Obviously, Gojo doesn't throw Sukuna through a building thinking it's gonna kill him, and even though Sukuna's using domain amplification to nullify Gojo's Limitless, he doesn't expect this to make a real difference either. This hand-to-hand combat phase, for us, is just spectacle, and for the characters, just a way to feel out their opponent. Now if the fight was decided by this hand-to-hand combat, well then we wouldn't be talking about it, but it's only the beginning. Phase 2 of the fight is when the real contest begins. It's a back and forth between their domain expansions. They go through a total of 5 iterations conditions of this game of tug of war, adjusting their domain's conditions each time. The first domain clash went to Sukuna. While their strength was even, his barrierless domain was able to destroy Gojo's from the outside. Gojo survives using a combination of reverse curse technique to heal and simple domain to withstand Sukuna's slashes. The second domain clash is then initiated. This time Gojo altered the conditions of his domain, making the outside more durable than the inside. However, Sukuna altered his conditions too. With a binding vow, he disabled his own sure hit effect in exchange for stronger power outside the domain, once again destroying Gojo's domain. Gojo then initiates his third domain expansion. We don't see what happens inside the domain, but we learn that it's pretty much a stalemate. Gojo's domain was shattered, but he was able to injure Sukuna to the point where he couldn't maintain his domain. There's a brief moment where neither can use their domain while they recover. Then, the fourth iteration begins. Gojo's barrier can sustain 3 minutes of Sukuna's. Can Sukuna withstand 3 minutes of Gojo in hand-to-hand combat? Yes, exactly so. Another stalemate, another brief pause, and then iteration 5. But Gojo initiates his domain 1/100th of a second faster than Sukuna, meaning unlimited void connected. Gojo has a massive advantage, that is until Maharaga is released. Suddenly, it's revealed that Maharaga has been adapting to unlimited void throughout this entire phase 2 of the fight. Maharaga destroys the barrier, ending the domain. Due to the extreme exhaustion and brain damage the two have both endured, neither are capable of initiating another domain. That marks the end of phase 2 and the beginning of phase 3. It's back to hand-to-hand combat, where we've seen Gojo have the edge. He throws Sukuna around for a bit, but is eventually struck back. The two exchange dialogue, revealing that Maharaga needs 3 more turns of the dial until it has solved Gojo's Limitless. Now, as the audience, we have a very clear idea of their respective win conditions. Gojo has to deal massive damage in a short amount of time to finish off Sukuna. Sukuna has to stall long enough for Maharaga to adapt to Limitless. The fight is now in crunch time. It's a bit of a cat and mouse chase. Gojo is restricted to only using his blue attraction ability because he can't afford his others to get adapted to, or so Sukuna thinks. Gojo suddenly whips out a reversal red, but Sukuna actually tanks it well, that is, until he doesn't. Using a sneak attack as well as his surroundings, Gojo wraps the red all the way around the building, exploding it on Sukuna's back. Now with a free shot, Gojo then connects a black flash right to Sukuna's chest. However, Sukuna subs in Maharaga, who slices through Gojo's Limitless. The battle is not over though. Maharaga is the one who can surpass Limitless, not Sukuna yet. The two synergize to exploit this, with Sukuna on the defensive, trying to help enable Maharaga's offense. Gojo suddenly seems more like the mouse than the cat. To add to the chaos, Sukuna summons Agito. Gojo now has to juggle all 3 of them at once. He attempts a red at Maharaga, who tanks it well, suggesting that it's already adapting to red. It's finally clear how Gojo has to win this fight. He must connect a hollow purple. With this in mind, we enter phase 4. Gojo deduces that Agito is healing Sukuna. Sukuna is back in hiding, waiting for Maharaga to create a more effective adaptation against Gojo's Limitless. And it does just that. It sends a slice that cuts Gojo's arm off entirely. The 3 of them rush after him now. Gojo fires a maximum output blue against Agito, decimating the 10 Shadows beast and making it a 1v2. With a second black flash, Gojo is now on fire, and Sukuna is nervous. Gojo hurls the 2 through a building and starts initiating a reversal red. Sukuna's okay with this because Maharaga can tank it for him, but in a sneak attack, Gojo shoots it straight into the sky, toward the blue that had just eliminated Agito. Sukuna commands Maharaga to intercept the red, but Gojo stops Maharaga. Sukuna tries to pierce the red himself, but with chance, Gojo boosts the blue, which intercepts the pierce. Red and blue finally connect, creating a hollow purple and achieving Gojo's win condition. But don't forget that Sukuna also achieved his win condition of solving Limitless. So who wins? Who gets the magic block of narrative? As a Gojo fan, I regret to inform you that it goes to Sukuna. Using Maharaga as a model, Sukuna learned how to cut through the world, effectively slicing the space that Gojo inhabited, killing my goat. Both of these characters displayed unmatched strength and fantastic strategy, but what narrative trait did Sukuna exhibit that Gojo lacked? Why did he deserve the narrative block? This is a question that I thought about for a long time. A lot of people chalk it up to plot armor, but I don't think that's fair. With such a highly complex fight, it's not really reasonable to sum it up to a single trait, but I want to try anyway. Let's start by looking at their ideologies. Sukuna lives by the philosophy that it pays to be selfish. He thinks the world rewards selfishness with strength. So is that it? Sukuna won because he's more selfish? Well, does Gojo believe the opposite? Not exactly. Yes, Gojo does have love for other people, but he's never credited his selflessness for his strength. One obvious trait that could explain Sukuna's victory was that he was more prepared. However, I feel like that's a bit weak, and I think we can dig deeper. I'm trying to find the moral of the story here. Imagine how lame it would be if JJK's message was to always be prepared. On that note, I think we can look ahead to future chapters to help us out here. So on Reddit, I saw a post by user NFS-NNN saying that Yuji defeated Sukuna through unwavering compassion. This panel here tells us everything we need to know. It's his strength of will that enabled him to win. Yuji adamantly clung to his philosophy of compassion and understanding and got Sukuna to concede his own beliefs. Now let's back it up to the fight of Gojo versus Sukuna again. Regarding Sukuna's philosophy, he clings to it like it's the only truth in the entire world. From the core of his being, he believes in selfishness, independence, and hedonism. Meanwhile, what does Gojo believe in? Is it selflessness? He often makes it seem that way, but in the airport scene following his death, his peers called him out for this. They said all he really wants is to be satisfied through fighting. Well, what is the source of his dissatisfaction? All his life, Gojo has been alone due to his strength. He wants to know if this strength defines him or if he defines his own strength. During the fight, we see him slowly become satisfied with the realization that maybe he isn't the strongest. Maybe he can define himself, but back at the airport, he reveals that he still isn't satisfied because Geto wasn't with him. So what is this guy's deal? What I'm trying to get at is that Gojo is a very inconsistent character, not in the sense that Gege failed in writing him. I think it was intentional. Gojo is filled with doubts and a longing and dissatisfaction. Simply put, he's uncertain. Whereas Gojo lost the fight because of all of his uncertainties, I believe that Sukuna won the fight because he was more resolute. I even think this difference between the two characters manifests itself throughout their battle. Sukuna went into the fight with a clear plan and stuck to it until the end. Gojo went into the fight with an impromptu, haphazardous attitude, and it made him always seem one step behind. Had he lived his life and fought this battle with more certainty, I don't think Gojo would have lost. It's not that Sukuna's ideology was right or wrong, but it's the extent to which he unapologetically abided by it that gave him the edge in this fight. This narrative rule does apply later on in the fight against Yuji, who has even more resolve than Sukuna. I can confidently, unapologetically say that the moral of JJK is to cling truthfully to what you believe in, to live without regrets. After all, the source of all curses is regret. While many consider this fight's ending to be controversial, I'm very satisfied with it. We get the blocks of raw strength, we get a fantastic display of strategy from both parties, and to cap it off, it's decided by a key narrative difference between the characters. If you took away anything from this video in this series, it's to do things with strategy and do things with purpose. It might just give you an edge in whatever it is you do. With this mini-series coming to a close, expect my new videos to not all be about fight scenes. I want this channel to reach a point where I can talk about anything I want. However, the fight videos have been super fun to make, so I fully intend on revisiting this topic in the future. Also, I've made a Patreon. There's nothing posted there yet, so only check it out if you want to show support. I'm wrapping up school this month, so I'll be able to crank out a lot more content, and I plan on posting videos on Patreon maybe a week before I make them public to YouTube. I'm not really sure yet. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, liking and subscribing is the best way to show that. Until next time.